good afternoon. My name is Alex Clark, and on behalf of Aberdeen Performing Arts and all the festival partners, welcome to Granite Noir. It is the third and final day of the festival. It's just been such a pleasure to be a part of, such a pleasure to watch events. Thank you so much to the festival team for programming these fantastic events with these fantastic authors. And on that note, we are going to talk about something dark and vengeful and nasty and vicious and violent. We are going to talk about revenge, and I am so delighted to be joined by three authors who have taken revenge in different ways as their subject. They are Stina, author of The Silver Road and The Last Snow. They are Bjorg, author of The Creek on the Stairs, and they are Lesley, author of The Rumour, Who Did You Tell, and The Dare. Now, where to begin? Well, I will just begin by saying that I was doing what we've all been doing in the last year and setting up a Zoom chat with some girlfriends, and we were, as you always do, saying we must remember to talk about this and we must get onto that and that bit of gossip about so and so. And I said, well, don't worry, I will be going through a list of the grievances and slights that I am currently mulling on. And everybody went, yes, brilliant, I'll do that too, because everyone loves to nurture and feed their grievance and their sense of slight. It's surely a short step to take that into fiction. I am going to ask each of you just in turn, if I may, just to talk about your books and why you started to think about revenge. Do you want to lead off, Lesley?
Okay, well, The Dare starts with a tragic accident. It's about two teenage girls, they're 13, Lizzie and Alice, and they are out walking one day in the countryside on their favourite walk. And this walk includes an open crossing, a train crossing. And they start to have an argument. And the next thing that Lizzie knows, she is coming round on the side of the railway track. She's just had an epileptic seizure, and her best friend Alice has died. She's been killed by a train, and Lizzie has absolutely no recollection of what happened. And as if that's not bad enough, Alice's family and her friends subsequently seem to think that Lizzie had a part to play in Alice's death. Fast forward 12 years, and Lizzie's now a young woman, and she's moving into a new home with her fiancé. And one day she hears a news item on the TV about a similar tragedy, a train-related tragedy. A little girl's been killed on a level crossing. And this news item, it brings back all these traumatic memories from the past. And from that point on, very strange things start to happen to Lizzie, things that remind her of the accident. And so the novel really is exploring what happened on that day 12 years ago with the two little girls. But is it just Lizzie's fractured memories and her doubts and guilt, possibly what part she might have played, or is something more sinister going on? Is somebody else trying to take their revenge?
Yes, that's where the element, because she, of course, is not seeking revenge. She's seeking some sort of peace and some kind of closure, this terrible thing that's happened to her. But vengefulness very much plays a part in the book, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, she just wants to get on with her life. She's her epilepsy's in remission. She wants to go to university and study English. So she's looking forward to moving on with her life, but someone is determined that that's not going to happen. I don't know why. I mean, I seem to have dealt with revenge in all three of my novels. I'm not quite sure what dreadful thing happened to me in my past that I have to explore it.
We'll explore it in the next hour, I dare say. I think we'll explore where our kind of fascination with revenge comes from. Stina, if I could just come to you, and I should say, first of all, that we're going into your publication week, aren't we? Your book, certainly in the UK, is about to come out, isn't it?
Yes, I think it was released on February the 4th, so it's been out for a few weeks. Yes.
And you are speaking to us, I should say, we're all in very different places. I'm in Ireland, Lesley, you're in Essex. Stina, you're in the States, aren't you? So you've joined us at breakfast time on Sunday.
Yes, I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and it's 9 a.m., so bright and early.
Just tell us a little bit about The Last Snow, which takes place in Iceland, in Lapland. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I returned to my home. I was born and raised in northern Sweden. So the last snow takes place in a little village in the north. And it's a very kind of claustrophobic tale. We meet Liv, who is an adult woman in her 30s. And she is living still with her father in her childhood home with her teenage son. So we meet this family that is still very much living together. And Liv is very much kind of stuck. She has never really taken that step to get her own life going. And also, we also meet Liam, who is a young man trying to create a better life for himself. So both Liam and Liv are trying to sort of break free from the life they're living. And also, when you're in these small, isolated rural villages, people know each other and they have known each other for generations. So Liv's father has a lot of people, he's created a lot of trouble in the past that is still affecting the family, and the family has a lot of eyes on them and a lot of sort of people that may be out to get them, so to speak.
We should say, I mean, Liv's father is not the nicest guy, is he? He's not the kind of guy you'd warm to.
No, he's very domineering, and he has created quite a bit of trouble in the past. And that's what's so interesting too about these rural places where families live close to each other for generations, that these grievances live on, and children can almost inherit their parents' arguments and disputes. So I thought that was very fascinating when I wrote this book, how something can live on for decades. And how the past can really come back to haunt you.
Yes, well, there are kind of multiple pasts in Eva Bjorg Aegisdottir's The Creek on the Stair, for which many congratulations, Eva. It's your debut novel, and it's got so much in it. There are so many different worlds colliding, because we have this central character, a policewoman, a police officer, detective, who has gone back to a hometown that she wanted desperately to get away from, to discover a crime that features a woman who kind of did something similar. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so in my book, there is Detective Elma, who is coming back to her hometown, Akranes, which is also my hometown. And she is kind of escaping a failed relationship and doesn't really want to go back to her hometown. And but soon after, she gets a job there, and soon after, there's a body found by a lighthouse in the town. And it turns out to be a mother of two who used to live in Akranes as well, and abruptly moved away with her mother when she was about 11. So they are unraveling a lot of old secrets, and involving a lot of powerful people in town. So
one of the things that the book has, and in fact all your books have in common, and I'll ask you, Eva, to answer this first, and then if you would to Lesley and Stina, one of the things that you've all done is create these multiple time schemes, which of course are constantly sort of putting the reader in a now and then situation, and you're trying to kind of work out how the story before might possibly have led to the story now. I mean, that's quite a challenging thing to do as a writer, isn't it? And for your first novel, how did that feel to try and create these kind of stories that the connections have to be kind of opaque to us, the readers, for us to be interested to find them out, don't they?
Yeah, I think it gives the story more depth, but I think it's also just like the idea that that you want to get justice for something done in the past, because we all want justice to be served, and the bad guys have to pay for what they've done, and even though it happens a long time ago. So
yeah. Lesley, how did that feel for you? Because you're creating a child's world. Well, you know, you all have been, but
I found that yes, it was quite a challenge for me actually, because my first two novels, they were told from a sort of linear point of view. You know, there were sort of extracts from the past, from newspaper articles and things like that in the rumour, but this was the first time I'd written a dual sort of timeline, and I really enjoyed it because it was writing the same character but at different times of her life. So that was good to get the different voice, the childlike voice and the voice of the adult. And I'm very interested in memory and how, the things that we remember from our childhood, we don't really know how accurate they are, because as a child, our feelings and emotions are sort of skewed by what's going on in our life at that time. So it's interesting to look back at it from an adult perspective. But yes, I did enjoy having those two timelines, and I know some authors write like one timeline and then they write the other, and then they sort of weave them together. But I didn't. I wrote them sort of as they appear in the novel. And that was quite good, because if I got a little bit bored with one, I could move on to the other.
Stina, did you find that equally a kind of challenge? And did you want to sort of work on one storyline at a time, or were you kind of constantly braiding them together?
I kind of agree with Lesley. I thought it was very fun, and I liked to weave them together as I was going along. And I realized that Liv had this past. My main character had this past that really had a huge bearing on her life today. And I wanted to kind of give glimpses to what had happened when she was a younger girl. And I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was very interesting, and surprised me as well as I was writing kind of the scenes and what Liv had been up to in her past. Because with my writing, I kind of let the characters lead me through the story. And I planned very little beforehand. So I'm usually very surprised as I go along, and just writing those snippets from Liv's past was a lot of fun, and revealed a lot of things to me as well as I was going along.
Well, this is something I'd really like to come to with all of you, because at the heart of Revenge and at the heart of your novels is that feeling of a past misdemeanor, a crime, a trauma, something that, as you've all said in one or other way, you want to right a wrong. Justice must be done. So for anybody to do that, especially, I mean, when, as the proverb has it, revenge is a dish best served cold. If your revenge isn't immediately taken, it stews for such a long time that any attempt to get that revenge going to be so overlaid with your understanding of the past. What kind of things did you want to explore, and did you want to say about the idea of revenge over time? Now, I've thrown that out to you. Who would like to actually? Lesley, I can see you. You're going to start us off.
Well, I think that's the most interesting type of revenge, because I think the type of revenge that simmers and seethes for years is very dangerous. It's very corrosive and manipulative and premeditated. And of course, revenge stories thrive in the thriller genre, because I think evidence suggests that the more traits of neuroticism or narcissism you have, the more you're likely to be a vengeful person, and so that makes a great antagonist. It makes a great villain. In my previous novel, you had a point of view where the person seeking revenge was sort of fantasizing about different ways they were going to kill the main character, which possibly we've all had some of, not fantasies of killing someone, obviously, but fantasies of revenge. But with most of us, they sort of disappear with time and we move on with our lives. But I think revenge that simmers, that can really destroy us as well if we give in to it. It doesn't just, it's harmful. I mean, what was it Confucius says? If you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves, because you're going to leave one for yourself.
I'm really fascinated by what you were saying just at the beginning then. The idea of a sort of connection between somebody who is harbouring and seeking revenge and some kind of psychological fissure, I suppose, some kind of deficit or loss or problem that perhaps even predates that. You have to be a type of person, do you think?
Possibly, I think so. Yes, because I think we've all, as you said in the beginning, Alex, we've all entertained vengeful fantasies. I'm sure we have. We might not like to admit them, but we have. But for most people, that's where revenge stays in our mind, and we derive a certain amount of satisfaction from that because we imagine all these things we're going to do to get our own back on this person that's sort of done us wrong. But it takes a certain type of person, I think, to actually carry out, to enact revenge. That's quite something, isn't it, to do that? So
yes,
that's quite villainous.
And certainly in your book The Dare, I mean, we haven't talked much yet about the character who is attempting to enact the revenge, but that's a very fascinating portrait. Eva, what do you think? Do you think there's a certain person who wants to take revenge, and it indicates all sorts of other things about that person?
I don't know, because for me, when I was writing The Creek, I was at first I was trying to find a strong enough motive for murder, and I think revenge is one of the strongest feelings you have because it's something we can all relate to. If we have someone we love that is hurt, then we all want revenge and to seek justice. And I think it's a very primitive emotion. Like if you go back to the old days, it was eye for an eye, and it's just the way we are built, I think. Even though we have a justice system now, I think we can all be. I think it's fair to say that we don't always think that the crime, that what do you say, that they get enough jail time for certain crimes. So I don't know. I think in the moment, if someone would do something to someone I love, then I might be that person, and that's why I wrote about that because it's so relatable. I think everybody can relate to that feeling.
Eva, did you find out things about yourself in the process of writing that, about how you really felt about the idea of taking revenge, of having justice?
No, I just think after I had children, I think these feelings are stronger. That you read this awful news about something being done to children or something, and of course you want revenge. I think if someone would do something to my child, it wouldn't be enough to put them in prison for 10 years or something like that. So yeah, it depends. I would like to be very civilized and say, okay, you can go for jail for 10 years and then it's just enough. But I don't think it's like that when you're talking about someone you love.
Stina, does that chime with you, that idea of a very kind of personal impact of revenge?
Yes, and I think it's very fascinating too how revenge and revengeful thoughts, somehow I think people think it's going to feel liberating to finally carry this out, and that you're going to be free of this hurt that you've been carrying. And I find that fascinating because most of the time, if someone actually carries out a revenge, it becomes this domino effect of just bad, I think what you put out in the world comes back somehow. So it's a very futile thing to try to do. And that's also, here's my little kitty cat, but that was also something I wanted to explore was just this notion of how people may use revenge as a sort of, I'm going to be free if I do this, and this will liberate me. But it has quite the opposite effect.
Yes, it can be a sort of enslavement, do you think?
Right. And also if you let yourself live with these thoughts and this hurt, these revengeful thoughts, I think that is an enslavement. And I don't think carrying the act out will set you free.
I think we should just say to our audience there that we had been chatting beforehand about Stina's dog, who is, as she explains, not a morning person and is lying really quietly and contentedly, but we didn't know about the cat, and it's I was overexcited, hence I waved. But I think cats, can very well come into the conversation because they're probably too cool to take revenge. Although if they did take revenge, it would be the most ingenious and hurtful, probably, whereas a dog, I don't think they have a capacity for revenge. Do you?
No. And I noticed that too. He's much more forgiving and gentle than the cat.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, as women writers, and the idea, and you've written about female characters, and of course the whole idea of taking revenge is against that long-term stereotype, and we've already sort of talked about the kind of Judeo-Christian framework, as it were, of kind of revenge taking, an eye for an eye. But women are supposed to nurture, women are supposed to forgive, women are supposed to make things right again, aren't they? Did it come into your minds, all of you really, how to address that idea of how out of kilter it was for a woman to want to be so vicious, in a sense, to be so retributive?
It's an interesting question. I think women are equally capable of vengeance as men. I mean, sometimes women are accused of being too vengeful, aren't they? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and all that sort of thing, which I always think is a bit sexist because, when you think of the number of women that are killed by their male partners every week, obviously men like to enact revenge for things like infidelity and rejection and all sorts of things. But I think women are equally capable of revenge. I think possibly maybe they think about it more rather than actually carry it out. But I mean, there are evil women, aren't there? In my novels, yes, a lot of the time, sometimes the women are villains, but not in my latest novel. I think I've moved away now. So.
I'm not sure. I'm actually going to ask you to talk a little bit about the character who is seeking revenge in your novel, and obviously the last thing we want to do is give away kind of spoilers, but I think there certainly is a character who in the past has sought revenge and may or may not be doing so at the same time, and that's a very dark and curious character, isn't it?
It is, and but I think also revenge sometimes stems from very deep pain. And that character obviously is still harbouring a lot of pain and resentment at something that she feels is an injustice, that she feels that someone is responsible, or that I shouldn't give anything away, should I? They feel that somebody is,
It's so difficult, isn't it? Absolutely last thing I want to do is to spoil anybody's reading pleasure. But Eva, if I could ask you this idea of something deep in the past, some deep pain. I mean, that is so very true in your book, A Creak on the Stairs, because in the past there is a great deal of abuse, the nature of which we don't fully understand, and we know that there's something there. Again, I don't think this is giving anything away, but it takes the course of the novel to tease out exactly what has gone on. But of course, there are things, as you were saying earlier, for which revenge would be an entirely legitimate and understandable feeling. Whether or not you act on it is a different matter.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in The Creek, without giving anything away, there isn't it isn't black and white, and there isn't any clear villain, or so I mean, I don't know, it's hard to answer that.
Yes, it's a complicated question, isn't it? But there are these as you're saying, great sort of traumas that, if they are, of course, not addressed, I mean, whether, leaving aside whether things are addressed by the penal system, the judicial system, but if they simply lie buried, then some kind of trauma will come out somewhere, won't it?
Yeah, but I think it's of course best for everyone to kind of get a closure on cases like that, and people just have to find it with themselves to forgive, and it's of course best for you in the end, because sometimes when you say you have to seek justice, there isn't any justice, because what's done has been done, and you don't get anything by getting revenge other than in the end you just feel worse, I think.
Yes.
So it's complicated.
Yes, there are certainly very different kinds of revenge. I mean, the sort of, again, a phrase that we use from time to time, don't we? Don't get mad, get even, only really works when there's a way to get even. And of course, if there's been an irreparable loss, that's not actually possible. And I think in Stina, in your novel, you're creating such a complex kind of social world. And it very much is a place of its own, isn't it? And I'm just reminded that last evening I was chatting to Camilla Lapland, who was saying that she was talking about the importance of bringing up sons to treat women well. And she said that she'd said to one of her children, male children, if you ever do anything terrible to a woman, I'm going to send you straight to the north of Sweden. I wasn't sure if that was something that was said in Sweden, but the idea of I'm going to sort of exile you, I'm going to send you to sort of the back of beyond. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about place in your book, and indeed in all of your books, because as you said, this is a very curious place that you write about, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very isolated. It's very small. People have often lived there for generations, which creates kind of I think it's a society. If you move to one of these villages up north, it can be very hard to gain access. It takes time to be fully accepted and to become part of this society. And I also think, like I said, these hurts and disputes can live on through the generations. So that's very fascinating when it comes to questions of revenge. And I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, and I think everyone has a breaking point. And if you've been carrying traumas, or if it's repeated trauma, I think sooner or later there will be a break. Especially if you like Liv, who has been living with her father, and he's not very liked in the surrounding area. I think that kind of comes off on her, and then she's raising a son, and she wants him to not be part of that. But yeah, I think everyone has a breaking point, and I think when it's very claustrophobic and it's very small, and you can't really change who you are very easily, because everyone already has a preconceived notion of who you are and who your family is, and I think it creates a very sort of claustrophobic and intense atmosphere that lends itself very well for writing these types of stories.
Yes, precisely, and it's very much the case in the creek on the stairs that we have this detective who's gone back to the base, and it's almost immediately is sort of hampered in various ways by the fact that she'll meet someone and she's gone to school with them, or there'll be some kind of connection for all the police officers trying to investigate this crime with people who they grew up alongside. That idea of going back in time, why did that intrigue you, Eva?
To go back in time.
To go back in.
To go back
to a place.
Yeah, I think it's because I can relate to that. I grew up in Akranes, and the population is about 5,000 people, and now I live in Reykjavik, and when I go back there, it's like I'm always at a reunion, because I'm meeting the same people, and I think it's very true what they say. Like when you are at school, you get a certain status, and like in small towns, you also get a certain status. Like people think certain things about you and what you do. When you're a teenager, it maybe haunts you forever if you live there. So to go back, it's hard for some people, I think, and that's true for Elma in the story. she didn't have very good teenage years, and she finds it very difficult to meet all the people that she went to school with, and I think it's in small towns like that, the people that have it good, they stay there, and the people that don't, they move away. And I totally understand that, because I mean, in Akranes, there are many people that had like terrible nicknames and stuff like that, and I can't see them living there. So yeah, it's a very
Lesley, this really crops up in your book too, doesn't it? Because as we've said, Lizzie is trying to create a new life. She's moved into her boyfriend's house. That part of her life is relatively kind of anonymous. We don't know a great deal about huge amounts about, the community that she's living in now. But we certainly know about the kind of small town life that she was trying to get away from, don't we?
Yes, and I think the fact that she's 13, and I think 13 is quite an interesting age. It's quite a dangerous age, actually, because you're in that transition between childhood and being an older teenager. And, going back to that small town and the claustrophobia and everybody knowing everyone's business. And Lizzie was bullied when she was at school. I mean, even before Alice, her best friend, died, she was bullied because she suffers from epilepsy, and that some of the mean girls at school used to take the mickey out of her when she had a seizure. So she was already dealing with that sort of feeling on the edge of things, feeling a little victimized. And then of course when Alice is killed, it becomes worse, because she's not only she's lost her best friend, she's lost her ally, and the bullying and the rumours just get worse. And so she, in the end, her parents move her away. They start afresh. So that's the sort of topic I explored in the rumour as well, with someone coming back to their hometown, which was a small town. And it's ripe for sort of the psychological thriller, isn't it? Returning to a small town and all the resentments and the old rivalries.
Yes, exactly. When we think about vengeance, and when we think about, what we're talking about today, vengeful hearts, we think in terms of those really big things, somebody murdering someone in revenge for something that's done. Of course, there's always that idea of avenging too, of actually going and making something right that we've alluded to here. How much do any of you think that revenge is kind of actually woven into our sort of daily lives as well, in much, much smaller ways? I mean, one might just, revenge oneself by being a bit mean about someone. We see that a lot, for example, on social media. And do you think, I feel very much that's a kind of thing you've all addressed in the books too, not the big R revenge, but the way that those relationships in small communities work. Who'd like to, where is my finger going to fall? Actually, Stina, I'm going to ask you to come in on this, if you would.
Well, I'm thinking too of there's a lot of loyalties in these small communities. Like I have, my other main character, Liam, who has a brother who gets him into quite a lot of trouble. He drags him into all kinds of bad business. And I think just the loyalty also makes you vulnerable for avenging and doing things that you may not want to do just because you're looking out for other people. And that becomes very fascinating to explore in writing. And I think sometimes you're doing it for others and not necessarily
yes that's it. You're trying to be a kind of rescuer in a sense, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a sort of like loyalty or protective type of thing that goes on between family members and friends, and sometimes we carry out these sort of bad acts to save another. So there, it's more complex than you think, and it's not always about oneself.
Ava, I would say in the curriculum that says there are all sorts of people who, have a reason to be fed up with someone else and want to take some kind of perhaps smaller revenge on them. Again, that's part of small community living. Well, any community living, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's just like the first emotion that comes up when someone is mean to you. You want to get back at them, like if someone makes you feel small or something. So, but I think in long term, it's something that comes with maturity, that you get better at dealing with these kind of situations. But again, I think it's even stronger when it's someone you care about than yourself. I think so.
Can I ask you all really if your feelings about the kind of revenges you would see enacted in your books changed as you were writing them? If some of your ideas, your concepts of the kind of morality that was being explored. Lesley, you're nodding there. I wonder if that's the case.
Because the character in the Dare who is seeking revenge, as I said earlier, she's well, they are coming from a place of pain. And so I think it's very easy to make someone, you have in your mind a sort of very vindictive, nasty person who's got something wrong, but actually that's them. There's never someone is never totally bad. They've always got something that you can identify with. And we can all identify with that desire for revenge because, as I think Stina or Eva said earlier, we're hardwired to feel these emotions, aren't we? It's an evolution. It's part of our primal brain to sort of make ourselves feel better. So I think, yes, I think as you're writing, you might have an idea as to how you want this story to pan out or what kind of traits you want to give a certain character, but that character then becomes real and will become more rounded, and you will sympathise. And I think the worst antagonists, you should have some sympathy for some element of them. You have to understand what's driving them, don't you?
This does go to the heart, doesn't it, of crime writing or thriller writing about crime, which is that a lot of the time for readers, you're seeking to give them a plot with suspense, with characters who are really gripping. You want them to want to know what's going to happen and not to be able to work it out themselves too soon. But you're also in a territory of writing about the most extreme events of human life, the violence, retribution, murder, premeditated murder. Terrible harm that people can wreak on one another. How much kind of does that sort of morality and those ethical decisions weigh on you as you're writing? That's a very big question. I realise that. I don't know who would like to take it first.
How much do they weigh on me? Quite a bit, actually. I think I certainly I get very involved with the novels as I'm writing them, and I thinking about them 24 hours a day, and yeah, you do worry about those things. I think it's the question was how much it weighs on you. Yes,
how much do you feel a sort of responsibility as a writer to write something truthfully, responsibly about these incredibly sort of deep human likenesses, I suppose.
I think in the sort of genre that we write in, the psychological suspense, it is all about the psychology, isn't it? Rather than the crime itself, rather than the actual act, the evil acts. It's what motivates someone to carry out these acts. That's the interesting thing about writing in this particular genre. So it's slightly different, isn't it, from another type of crime novel or a police procedural that's, murders and awful things happening. It's more about what's going on in somebody's mind and their fractured sort of emotions and what's driven them to behave like this. So it is something to consider, definitely. Yeah.
Stina, what about you?
No, I totally agree. I think that for me, I always say that the characters and the people are the true mystery to me as I write, because I want to get in there and understand their motivations and I think when it comes to, I agree with Lesley. I think when it comes to revenge and carrying out horrible acts, people often come from a place of pain or maybe a sense of it's a sense of survival. for a lot of people. They think that their own existence is threatened in some way. So I try to always love every character, even my antagonist and even my bad guys. I try to love them and feel for them as human beings, even though they sometimes act very badly. Because I do think a lot of people come from these places of pain, and that it's often a defense mechanism.
Eva, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. For me, the psychological aspect is even more important than the crime itself. I wanted to go deep into the characters and why they did what they did, and I think that in the Creek, I think you get a sense of understanding for both the victim and the bad guy, or as to say. So I mean, I write about 2 books for each book I write, and that's why, because I'm always writing about the characters and trying to develop them and what they feel like, and so I really care about stuff like that the reader can relate to the characters.
Yes. Now, we've had so many questions coming in. I'm going to start throwing some more. I may come back and ask you some more questions. I have to start throwing some audience questions in because they're filling my screen here on the right. Duncan Beatty asks, what are your favourite novels of revenge that have inspired you?
Shall I go first?
Please, yes.
There are so many, aren't there? There are so many. It's such a popular theme. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, Great Expectations is a great revenge novel, because you think about how Miss Havisham nurtures and moulds Estelle to actually become a weapon of revenge against men, and not just against one man, but against all men. So that's a particularly good one. And then of course you've got Gone Girl, and more contemporary one where the revenge that's enacted and the fantasy that actually is carried out by the unexpected antagonist. So yeah, that there's some really good revenge novels out. There's so many. I mean, there's too many to mention, really.
Yeah, I would mention Gone Girl and also The Absolution by Yrsa Sigurðardóttir. I think it's my favorite kind of murder to read about revenge. It's so you get kind of like it feels good when it's well done.
Yes, there's a kind of catharsis to it in a way, isn't there? Because you're not having to do it, but something.
And satisfaction. Yeah.
Stina.
I would have to say Gone Girl as well. I really admire Gillian Flynn. I love her character development, and I love her atmosphere, and I think she did a wonderful job with that novel. I think it's kind of the pinnacle of the revenge novel.
And what we were talking about earlier about teenagers, I was thinking Carrie, Stephen King's Carrie. I mean, that's a classic revenge, getting revenge against the mean girls at school.
Yes.
And Carrie has the powers we all wish we had,
Yes, that's made me think, of course, of the enduring popularity of the film Heathers, which is you're right. Yes. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Novels, films, so many we could think of them as having really significant elements of revenge, even if they're not the central thing. However, I've got a question for Eva from Tap the Line. Is your forthcoming novel, Girls Who Lie, going to be set in Akranes once again with the same protagonist?
Yes, it's the second in the series, so it's the same police detectives, but it goes a bit. It travels a bit more. It's also Borgarnes, which is a town about 30 minutes from Akranes, and Sandgerði, and it's a bit wider, more towns, but yeah, and essentially it's Akranes and the detectives there.
And Leanne Fox, just staying with a question for you, Eva, asks, do you ever find that people from your hometown think that the characters in your book set there are based on them, and are they flattered or are they offended? Well, it's obviously entirely depends what you say about them. But,
yeah. After I wrote the book, everyone was coming up to me and being like, yes, I can see that this is that person. Just tell me. And I was like, I was very thinking about that when I was writing it, that I didn't want anyone to like feel that they recognized someone from the book. But it's hard. I mean, people are always trying to see who I'm talking about in Akranes. So,
well, I have to say, small towns or not small towns, there is a strong theory that if you really want to take revenge on people, you become a writer, isn't there? And you sort of it's all there.
Revenge on the page. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I have a question here from Roxanne. Do you, to all of you, do you take ideas from true crimes? Or are they completely sort of invented? Who would like to start us off there?
With my debut, I was very much inspired by this highway. My debut novel is called The Silver Road, and it takes place on an actual road in northern Sweden. And I was very inspired by the Highway of Tears in Canada, which is a long stretch of Canadian road where a lot of women have disappeared without a trace for decades, and some have been found murdered, some are just lost, and it's still going on up there along this road. So it's earned that nickname Highway of Tears, and I was watching a lot of documentaries and I kind of became obsessed with this Canadian road. So that was kind of the seed that made me write The Silver Road.
That's really interesting though, because obviously you took that and you made something completely different out of it, really. You put it somewhere else, developed all sorts of themes. But sometimes, I guess, for writers, it really can be a germ, can't it, rather than a wholesale situation that you take.
Yes, because when I saw this Canadian landscape and this kind of desolate Canadian road, I mean, it made me think of my home area and kind of the isolation and the beauty and the nature. So I thought, what would happen if girls were disappearing along a road in northern Sweden? And that's kind of all I started thinking about. And then the story just grew and became something completely different. But it's very fascinating how these real life obsessions can create a germ and get you started.
Lesley.
Well, my debut novel, The Rumour, was loose. It wasn't based on a true crime, but it was loosely inspired by the Mary Bell case. And I'm sure most people know about that. But Mary Bell was a 10-year-old girl who killed 2 little boys in the Newcastle area in England. And I've always been interested in children who kill other children, because I'm particularly interested at the level of vitriol that's leveled against these children when they grow up and they've been rehabilitated. And that was really the sort of germ of the story. I actually heard a rumour that somebody, not Mary Bell, but another sort of notorious child killer, was living in the neighbourhood where I was currently living. And that got me thinking, how do we know, where there are safe houses? We don't know who's living there. We don't have a right to know because that person has served their custodial sentence. It's like we were talking about earlier. What's the difference, revenge and justice? There's overlap there, isn't there? Because they've served their custodial sentence, but the victim's family feel that they haven't got justice because their pain and their anguish carries on unabated. And so if, that's how it started really. The characters in the novel hear a rumour that somebody, who killed a child when she was small is now living in their neighbourhood, and it sort of escalates from there. And so that was definitely inspired by a real life case.
Eva, has real life stuff come into your work?
No, not like an idea that was inspired by a real life case, but I do listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I do get a lot of ideas about some involvement in the stories, but nothing specific.
There's a question here from Anonymous, who asks a fantastic question, which really goes to the heart of what we've been talking about. In fact, you were just talking about, Lesley. Where is the line between revenge and vigilantism? And we know, of course, as a society that vigilantism is really, really dangerous. I mean, it's the expression of it in so many instances leads to such untold harm. I'm sure you've all thought about that. What are your feelings about the question?
Yeah, vigilantism is really dangerous, isn't it? The rule of the mob. That is what particularly inspired me with the rumour, and it's I think people have that sense, that why should the perpetrator of the crime be free and able to live their life when they can't, when they're always reminded of their grief, and so it's almost like it's an indignance, isn't it? It's an indignation that they must get justice. It's almost like a proportionality thing, isn't it? You've done this to me, you've ruined my life, you've taken someone very dear to us. We've got to hound you for the rest of your days. But it can be, that's just as bad, isn't it? Because that's, just like you were saying earlier, Eva, about cycles, or was it about cycles of revenge? Justice is about closure, isn't it? You have a custodial sentence and you serve your time, you're rehabilitated, you're free. But the other side of it is that you're never going to make up for the pain that you've caused. So the emotional justice has never been granted. So it's a difficult balance, isn't it?
Of course, we often see, and thinking about Eva and Stina, you both writing about these very close and closed societies, that vigilantism is often people taking revenge, as it were, on other people's behalf. I mean, frequently without their knowledge or desire, but it comes from a place of often very sort of diffuse kind of anger, doesn't it? Anger with things that feel like, shouldn't be happening, and that somehow you've got to take power and stop them from happening.
Yes. Yeah, taking the law into their own hands, definitely. It's a dangerous topic, but it's a very difficult one, isn't it? It's because you can understand people's sense of it, outrage and injustice sometimes, but doesn't make it right.
Dina, what do you, given that you've written, about this very closely connected small town, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think also when trauma and injustices happen within families and within people that are living very close to each other, I think it can sometimes be hard to involve law enforcement, for example. It's very hard when you've been carrying trauma for years to feel like anyone else can do justice for you and legitimize things that may have happened years ago. So I think some people feel like the justice system can't serve them. And that creates this sort of dangerous state where you try to protect yourself or set things right on your own. And I think that's a very fascinating and tragic thing to explore. But I think definitely when the justice system kind of fails, or you feel like it's not there for you, I think that's when people really might go to that place.
Yes, I mean, thinking, Eva, about the kind of backstory, the historical story in your book, you get a sense very much of a child who's kind of forsaken by authorities, by the people who might keep her safe, don't you?
Sorry,
you feel that the child in the story, in your story in the past, there is no one there keeping her safe. She has been let down, is very much a feeling I got from your book.
Yeah. Of course, we have a child that is growing up in very bad environment. So I think I wanted people to have compassion for her, but I think with what you were saying about revenge, again, it's the feeling we get first, and it's very primitive, and but like we were talking about, it's hard when the justice system isn't you feel like there isn't any justice, but I think we have evolved in such a way that we know better now. So
Yes.
I don't know. It's a very hard topic.
It is. Now, I have a question here, which I think might have to be our last question, I'm sorry to say. And I'm apologies to people who haven't had their questions answered, but we've got to a lot. But I really like this one. Is revenge for certain people an unstoppable force? Or is there something that could have prevented your characters from seeking revenge? Which is a kind of rather terrific question to end on, I think, because that idea of something that simply couldn't be stopped is an interesting one for a novelist who's constructing the story. Who would like to start us off on that? Stina, how about you?
Well, I'm thinking of my one character who is really really wanting revenge, and I think the problem is that he is being sort of abused over and over and over. And I think if it had stopped and his abuser had taken a step back, I think it was the last straw. And sometimes the last straw creates that unstoppable force when it piles on one thing after the other. So I think it could have been prevented if people had cared more for each other. Yes.
Eva.
It's maybe hard to answer without spoiling anything, but I think that if something would have happened sooner, because in my book it's a lot about all this time that has passed since something bad was done. So it's been like 20-30 years or something that it has simmered, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
I think if something would have been done sooner, because it's a lifetime of trauma and
Lesley.
Yes, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Without giving too much away, I think it can be stoppable. But obviously we're writing fiction and we're writing crime fiction, so there has to be a dramatic climax, or it wouldn't fit into the genre. But I think in real life, yes, these things can be stopped. If people are given the right information or they have help to work through their feelings. But again, crime fiction, we've got to have a baddie, haven't we? Or we've got to have a goodie doing bad things, or we're not going to have a novel.
Well, here's the issue. I mean, you've got to have a baddie, and at some point, whether it's in the past, or you've got to have a body as well, haven't you? This is kind of, there has to be loss, doesn't there? There has to have been a kind of irrevocable loss. The stakes to be high. Is that a kind of fair way of understanding suspense novels, do you think?
I think so. I'm not sure there has to be a death. There has to be there has to be a death in many crimes, certainly in police procedural novels there has to be a death. There doesn't always have to be a death, I don't think, in a psychological suspense novel, although there often is. But there has to be a death of some sort, a death of, it could be a metaphorical death or a physical death, or an accidental death perhaps. But there does have to be some kind of death, I think. But it's more about what's happening in the mind, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. Yes. Listen, I'm before we close, I'm just going to come to each of you in turn, and we'll start with Eva, I think, and then Stina and Lesley, and just tell us as quickly as you like, or as expansively as you like, what you're up to now and what the next thing is. I mean, maybe you're starting by saying there's a number 2 in the series, but can you tell us what you're up to now?
Yes. Like I said, the Girls Who Lie, the second one in the series, is coming out in the UK now in this summer. But I'm actually writing book 4.
My goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So the third came out before last Christmas here in Iceland, and that was the third one in the series. But the fourth is a bit more psychological suspense novel, not a police procedural.
So it's something you've kind of switched the focus a bit there.
Yeah, a bit. Although the police is there, but the police's part is very small. It's actually about. It happens in Snæfellsnes, which is a place where I have a cabin, and yeah, there's supposed to be a lot of mystical energy there because of the Jökull, Snæfellsjökull.
Oh, okay. Oh, I can't wait to read that one then. That's a little mystical energies.
I wanted to do maybe some kind of spooky, a bit ghostly story. So, yeah.
Hugely look forward to that. And of course, before that in the UK, as you say, the girls that lie, who lie. Stina, what's next for you?
I'm hard at work on my third novel, and it's a standalone. I only really write standalone, so I'm trying to create a new universe, and I'm trying to get to know these new characters, which I think is maybe the funnest part of writing, is to get to know these new people. And I'm returning, actually this time I'm returning to my hometown in the north, which will be kind of exciting, and I don't know how my family will feel about that, but yeah, I'm hard at work and just kind of having fun with it right now.
And just bobbing a kind of a rider of a question in there. I mean, it's so interesting that you create this territory. Then you're going back to another place in northern Sweden from Colorado. I wonder how interesting that kind of feels to you.
I think it started out just because I was so homesick. I mean, I've been living in Denver, Colorado for 15 years now, and I grew up in Sweden. My whole family's still in the north of Sweden. So it's been a way of like coming home and exploring my roots. And I think when you grow up somewhere, you get so blind to the uniqueness and the beauty of the area. And now I kind of have that outsider perspective as well as an insider perspective, which made it much more exciting to return back and write about those places.
Well, we're really, really enjoying reading about them and looking forward to the next one. Lesley, what devilment is going to happen next for you?
Devilment indeed. Yes, well, I'm busy working on book 4. In fact, I've got to deliver it by the end of March. So as soon as I finish this, I'll be back hard at work again. And like The Dare, it's set in southeast London. It's set in Charlton and Woolwich and in the borough of Greenwich, because the first 2 were set in this sort of fictional seaside town. But I thought, no, I'm not going to have all my novels set in Flintstead. So back to London now, and I think having moved away from London, I've now got that perspective on the area that I've spent most of my life. So, and it's narrated by 2 women. One has just lost her aunt. Her aunt has been brutally murdered in the flat above, and she is arranging her funeral. And the other character is a funeral director. And that's all I can say about it at the moment.
Well, the worlds of funeral directors and undertakers are deeply fascinating. So we really look forward to that. Listen, I mean, we've kind of scratched the surface of revenge, and we all know that in many ways the best revenge is happiness, which of course is tricky to get sometimes. But we've certainly had it this afternoon. Thank you so much, Eva Bjorg, Aegisdottir, Lesley Cara and Stina Jackson. But thank you also to our audience. It wouldn't be the same without you. Even if we can't see you, we're really thinking of you. Please do go and buy any of the books that you've been hearing about this afternoon at our festival bookshop. That's Waterstones. Do follow the link. Keep your eye out for further Granite Noir productions. And just thank you all so much, Eva, Lesley and Stina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.